Hi, I'm John Trishler from spvparts.com, and today I'd like to talk to you about a new wire harness system that we developed that's going to make your life so much easier. There's nothing on the market like it. There never has been. It's so unique, this new product line, that we filed for patent for it because it has so many applications. And while the possibilities with this particular system are pretty well endless, I would like to give you a few scenarios as we go along and kind of introduce the system. So let's get started. First off, let's talk about lights. Lighting applications are pretty much endless when it comes to options for your trucks, for aftermarket trucks. And we've got a few different styles here, so we'll run through some different scenarios. All right, so first let's talk about wire harnesses that come with factory lights. So typically when you buy a set of lights, whether it's Rigid or Baja Designs or Diode Dynamics or any other, most of the time you're going to get a generic bundle of wire. And sometimes you don't, but most of the time you do. And this is pretty much what it's going to look like. And that generic bundle of wire is going to connect to your lights for the most part. You can plug it in. It's either going to be too long or too short. More than likely you're going to need to get out the wire strippers, cut it down, splice it. You need some connectors to crimp together, splice it here or there. Hopefully when it's all said and done, you've got a harness that's usable. You've probably got a lot of time involved in putting it together, but you've also still got just bare wire that can rub on the metal of the truck and, you know, wear through the rubber and short out, catch on fire, and so on and so forth. So you probably need to go down now to a hardware store and get a box of loom so that you can slide that on top of your wire to protect it. Well, what we've created eliminates the need for all of that. And so we've created an entire wire harness system that allows you to simply plug and play into virtually any light manufacturer, any light type that you can get on the market. And let's go through a couple of those different light scenarios. First off, let's take a look at a couple of lights. Here's one light that has 3 wires coming out of it. So this is what's called a 2-stage light. This is a radiance scene light. And you'll notice the 3 wires, 3 bare wires, so there's no connector on it at all. So, you know, what do? You have to put a connector on it, obviously. There's no connector at all. But there are 3 wires. So one wire has power for the main white light. The black one is the ground, and the white one is going to be for your backlight, whether it be like a red backlight, an amber backlight, for effect. All right, so that's one style. Here's another style. This one's a Baja Designs light, and it uses a weather pack connector. So it's a 2-prong weather pack connector. So it doesn't have a backlight. It's just white light or amber, you know, depending on which light you get, and then that's it. So you got a power and a ground. But that's this type of connector. Then we've got a rigid light here, and this also uses a 2-pin connector, and this one uses what's called a DT connector. So that begs the big question, in a universal wire harness system, how in the world is it going to plug right in to this type of light, to this type of connector, to one that doesn't have a connector? Well, that's real simple. And before we go through all of our harnesses, let's talk about the connections. So the basic connections that we have, I'll just pick this harness here. The basic connections we have a 3-way weather pack connector here on the end. So you've got 3 wires. So whether you've got a light with a backlight or you've got a light with just a main light and just 2 wires, this harness is going to work for you. And you know how that works is because we've got an adapter that plugs right into it, regardless of which type of light that you have. So if you have this rigid light here, you plug in this adapter, and then we can simply plug it in like so. Or let's say we've got the Baja Designs light. Well, we can just take the 2-way weather pack adapter, plug that in, and now we've got a weatherproof connection for that light, just like so. Now, what if we've got a light that doesn't have any wires on it, just bare wires? It doesn't have a connector on it at all. How in the world is that going to connect to this? That happens sometimes. sometimes light manufacturers just don't put a connector on them. They just send you a bare end with 3 wires or 2 wires or whatever. Well, in that case, no problem, because with each of our harnesses, we include a set of connectors that are going to match these connectors on the harness. So in that instance, there's no way around it anyway. It has to do with your light, not the harness. You can simply crimp the pins onto the wires that are already there, slide on the connector, and then it's just going to plug right in, just like that. But we also include a set of connectors for the other end, so whatever you're connecting them to. Again, this isn't the harness. The harness has got connectors on the other end as well. But let's say that you've got a Raptor, for example, a Ford Raptor, and you've got 6 bare wires hanging down from the firewall for your upfitter switches. You can simply crimp the pins on those bare wires, slide on these matching connectors, and now you can simply plug your harness in. And if you ever want to switch wires and put a light on a different connection and so on, you can just unplug it and move it, just like that. It's real simple. All right, so now you understand the basics of how this universal system will fit with all the lights that you can possibly dream up and all the different connections. Whether they're 3-wire lights or 2-wire lights and so on, whether they have weather pack connectors or DT connectors or no connectors at all. These harnesses are going to plug right into your lights and make it very, very simple. And again, we've got a vast list of connectors here. But now let's talk about some of the different scenarios and some of the different main harnesses and some of the additions and how you can interconnect and come up with different scenarios. And this is all without cutting or splicing wires on your vehicle. So let's just start with the one that we had here. This is an Apillar harness, also known as a ditch light. All right. So this is one of your main harnesses, and this can connect to, this will run down to your firewall area. You've got a ground connection here. You've got a red for a power. You've got a white if you have a backlight. If you don't, you just don't use that one. Not a big deal, but you've got it if you do, so it's going to work in either application. In this case, you've got a ground loop, but you've also got a ground connector, so that's going to be available for some other applications, and I'll show you that in just a few minutes. So normally, you'll just connect this to a battery post or a bolt on the body. So this is your ditch light or Apillar harness, all right? All right, now next, let's take a look here. This is our triple fog harness. So with our triple fog harness, similar to the Apillar harness, except for this one's going to go the length down to the front of the bottom of each side of the bumper. This has 3 pairs of connectors, and each is numbered 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3 on each side. And then when you get to your switch wire end or your firewall end, you've got 1, 2, and 3 with those connections. And then you've got the 1 white wire connection for backlights if you have them. If you don't, again, you just don't use that, but you've got it there. And so you've got 3 connections here. So let's say you want to connect 3 separate pairs to 3 separate switches. You can do that with this harness. So you put it on switch 1, switch 2, switch 3. Let's say that you've got, for example, you got a radiance set of lights and you want to put all 3 pairs on one switch. Well, you don't have to cut the wires and splice them together and twist them. You just get our 3-way splitter combiner adapter, and those are going to just plug into each connection here, just like so. And again, these are weatherproof connections. And now you can put them all on one switch, just like so. All right, so that's another application. Pretty cool. Again, don't forget, you've got adapters, so no matter what lights you have, you're going to be able to connect to any of those lights. No splicing, cutting, or any of that, right? All right, so that's our 3 fog harness. We've also got a single fog harness. Let me see where I put that one. I believe I put it right here. So here's our single fog pair harness. So instead of having 3 pairs on each side, it's just 1 pair on each side. So depending on the application, F-150s, you might have, you know, just a single fog light that you want to put on each side to replace the factory fog lights. You might have 2. If you had 2, you wanted to replace 2 of them, and maybe you wanted both of them on the same circuit. If you want both on the same circuit, you can simply plug in one of these splitter adapters that are going to split that harness into 2 connections for 2 different pairs of lights on each side. Depending, and these are heavy duty gauge, and we have a chart so you can make sure you don't overpower each harness. But depending, let's say that you had some really heavy duty lights, which you shouldn't have any problem with a pair of fog lights on each side with this harness at all. But say you wanted to run 2 separate pairs, or even if you wanted them on 2 separate switches, you can run 2 of these single pair harnesses, or you could run 1 3-pair harness and just simply not use the 3rd connection. But let's say you ran 2 separate pairs, but you still wanted them on 1 switch. You ran these side by side. You can combine these 2 on this end with a 2-way splitter combiner, just like so. Another thing that you could do is, let's say that you had 2 pairs of aftermarket lights that you wanted to put down there in fog lights, and one of them was street legal, like an SAE version, and one was off-road use, right? And so you could use this for your off-road use light and run it to a separate switch. And then we've got these adapters here, depending on which one that you choose, that will simply plug into your factory fog light plug and then plug into any of your SAE lights as well. So depending on which connection that you need for that, that'll just plug right in. And then that will work on your factory fog switch that's already there with your street legal version. So you got some more options there. And again, this is just a few scenarios. There are so many different ways to use these. So that's your single pair fog harness. All right, so we'll put that aside here with our 3-pair fog harness and Apillar harness. All right, now let's talk about rear harnesses. So we've got a full-length rear harness, as you can see here. And this again will work on Raptors, F-150s, Rangers, Chevys, GMC, Dodge, Jeep, anything you've got. These harnesses are going to be universal and work with any of those applications. And so this is a full-length rear harness. So this will run to the rear of the vehicle, all the way up to the engine bay and into the firewall area, where you're going to have either switch wires in a Raptor, or you'll run out your connections for switches that you have built into the truck, or that you're adding to the truck, and so on. And so this will power 1 set of lights on each side, so a pair of lights, and then it will run up to your switches. Just like your other harnesses, we've got 3 wires here for our connections, and you can use any of the adapters if you need to take it down into 2. But 3 wires in case you have a set of lights that has a backlight. For example, Rigid Radiance, Radiant Scene, and SRL lights all have the red backlight you can have in the back of the vehicle. Gives it that cool effect. So you've got 3 wires in case you do. If you only need to use 2, then just plug in the 2-way adapter and you're good to go. So that runs up to your switches. Boom, you can turn the lights on and off with your switch. Some people, however, prefer that those lights come on when they put the truck in reverse. If you want the truck to turn the lights on in reverse, we've got an adapter for that as well. And we've got different versions of these adapters for different vehicles. And we're expanding this line as we go along, so hopefully we've got one for your vehicle, and if we don't, then we'll work with you to find out what connection that we need. We'll get that put together for you, and we'll expand this line as we go along. This one particular here is for the Ford Raptor, and we have them for the Rangers and the F-150s and so on as well. And so what you'll do is you'll just simply unplug the connector from the rear taillight. It's really easy to take out. You plug this back into the taillight, you plug the harness from the factory connection back into this, and then this drops down behind the bumper, and then you simply connect it to your rear harness. There's 2 extra ports on each side of the main connector. For the rear, you plug those connections in, and now when you put it in reverse, it triggers the rear lights to come on automatically, and you also have the ability on the switch. Let's say that you don't care about the switch, or you don't want to put a switch in, or you've got a vehicle that doesn't have a switch. That's fine too. We've got a short length rear harness that simply plugs into this adapter. So it just goes from the left side to the right side, and that's it. You put it in reverse, it turns them on. Put it in park or drive, turns them off. It's all built in, it's all integrated in. And you'll notice that there's 2 wires here. And the reason that there's 2 wires here are for those lights that have backlights. So in many applications, you'll want to power that red backlight with the parking lights or the marker lights. This is tied into that circuit as well. So when you plug in the white wire to your harness, whether it be the full length harness that'll give you the switch power, or the short harness that's just going to be for reverse trigger, when you plug in that white wire, it's also going to power the red backlights to those lights as well. So it'll give you the best of both worlds, really, which is really, really, really unique. And so you've got your bases covered, whether you want just with the reverse, just with the switch, or both. You've got 3 different versions, 3 different applications by using these harnesses in different ways to do that. Now, let's go a step further, because this gets even more complicated, but it's not complicated. It's simple once you understand how it works. And the idea is you don't have to figure out how to cut and splice wires. You just plug them in. All you need to know is which components to get, and you plug them in. So we've got our rear harness, right? Let's say we've got our taillight adapter plugged in to our truck. It's plugged into our full-length rear harness, right? Right back here, it's plugged in, okay? We've got our wires that run all the way up front to our engine bay. That's these 2 wires right here. You've got your white wire for your backlight. You've got your red wire for your power. Let's say that you do have a set of lights back there, like the SRL lights or the Radiance lights that have the red backlight. Now you've got your Raptor, and you've got your triple pair fog harness here that's powering 3, either the backlit amber 360 lights or Radiance lights. All right, and so we've got our white wire here, right? Well, since this white wire is now live, because we're getting power from the taillight adapter for the marker lights and the parking lights, we can simply plug in the white wire in the rear harness to the white wire in the front harness, just like this. And how do we do that though? Because these obviously don't match up. We've got a coupler. You simply plug in here, like that. You plug in here. You interconnect then the front and the rear harness together, and now the rear taillight adapter powers the red backlight in the rear and the amber backlights in the front, and you've got all that tied into your remote lock unlock feature and so on, whether it's rear lights or front lights and so on. So there's another scenario for you that helps you out with that. Now let's flip that page and we'll go back to another application where we say, well, we don't use the taillight adapter. We don't care about it coming on when we go in reverse. We don't care about any of that. We only want it on the switch, but we do have amber backlights, and we do want to power the amber backlights in the front and or the red backlights in the rear. Maybe we don't have rear lights, or maybe we do, but we want to power the ambers in the front. We've got an adapter for the Raptors that plugs in under the grille that accesses that same power to the marker lights, parking lights, etc. through the factory harness. You got your white wire, that plugs in right here to your front harness. If you have the rear ones as well, then you can just take one of our 2-way splitters, just like this. We can then split this connection in 2, power the front backlights, and then we can power our rear backlights as well with the other connection. So you can feed that power from the front or from the rear to the front harness, to the rear harness, to both harnesses. I mean, the possibilities are endless. All right, so we've got adapters. We've got connectors. We've got everything that you can imagine to make just about any custom application that we want. Now, what about light bars? All right, so we got light bars as well. We've got two versions of a light bar harness. We have a heavy-duty light bar harness, and we have a standard-duty light bar harness. Now, before I touch too much on the light bar harnesses, I want to tell you this much. All the wiring, all these harnesses that we use heavy gauge wire. As much as is going to be necessary for most every application, but we have a chart that you can go by to make sure that you're not overloading each circuit. But these are not light wires, these are the right applications for these different scenarios. For example, for fog lights, you're never going to typically need more than 16 gauge wire for a typical pair of fog lights. You have at least that. For the single pair fog harness, you're running 14 gauge wire, so it's heavier duty in case that you wanted to split those and run two pair onto one. Light bars. In this case, you have a heavy duty light bar harness because in a lot of cases you have big, heavy, bright, powerful light bars, 40-inch, 50-inch light bars. In some cases they may draw 15 amps, in some cases they may draw 25 amps. So in our standard duty light bar harness, we have a 14 gauge wire harness. That 14 gauge is going to handle up to 15 amps or a little bit more easy, right? No problem at all. That's for your standard duty light bar harness. If you're running like a 40, 50-inch Pro Series light bar running 25 to 30 amps, the heavy duty light bar harness is 10 gauge wire and it will hold up to 30 amps easily. All right, now it by itself in most applications, unless you're just really overutilizing a 10 gauge wire, you're probably going to need a relay in any application. Even the Raptor doesn't have a relay that's going to handle up to 30 amps standard. The switch wires are up to 15 in the first two, 10 in the second two, and then 5 in the last two. In a lot of cases, you can't use those last two 5 amps because most of your lights are going to draw more power than that. Well, to fix that, whether it be for the heavy-duty light bar harness or any of these others, if you need extra power, you need up to 30 amps, or if you have a vehicle that doesn't have built-in switches and relays and fuses, we have these simple plug-and-play relay adapters. So it's real simple. You just plug in the red power to your light bar harness here and the black ground. You'll notice, we talked about this earlier. These harnesses, most of them are going to have both a ring connector here for your ground, but they also have this connector here. In most applications, you're not going to have to use this. You're just going to use your ground ring here. But in the case where you want to add a relay, you can plug that ground in here, just like so. Just like so. And then that is going to ground that harness through the relay itself. And so you've got a power with a fuse, a 30 amp fuse here, and you've got your ground that's going to go to your battery ground side, power side of your battery, and then your line out to your switch, whichever switch you're going to connect that to. And that'll allow you to run up to 30 amps on that circuit through that relay and fuse. And so this connection can be added to any of these harnesses if you need more power than your particular switch is capable of handling. So if you want to use those last switches, those 5 amp switches on the Raptor, or 10 amp switches, and you need to draw more power than that for whatever application, I mean, even a pair of fog lights most of the time might blow that 5 amp circuit. It's just not powerful enough. You can do that with the relay add-on to any of those harnesses. Or if you've got an F-150 or a Ranger or any other vehicle that doesn't have built-in fuses and switch wires and switches, then you can plug in the relay and connect it to a switch that you add to the vehicle. And the power draw, the amp draw through that circuit doesn't matter because you've got that separate relay as well. So again, I think you can see that no matter what the application is, this new harness system is as unique and plug and play as it gets. And no matter what it is that you're looking to do, you don't have to hack up your truck. You don't have to cut factory wires. You don't have to splice into anything. This eliminates the need for all of that. And for those of you that like to do things yourself, you can. You don't have to hire a professional who knows how to take a string of wire, splice it up and cut it up just to make it work with your lights. You simply pick the harness application, the connectors that you need, you plug them all in, and you're off to the races. Thanks again for watching. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe, and visit us at spvparts.com for all of your aftermarket performance parts needs. Whether it be lighting or performance parts for your vehicle, we've got it. We've got the most advanced wire harnesses, obviously, as you can see with this new system. We also have the most advanced brackets and hardware to mount lights and parts to your vehicle as well. So you owe it to yourself to check us out. Again, spvparts.com. We'll see you next time.